Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here today. Today's the 7th, Thursday the 7th of March, 2024. Thank you for tuning in. Now, we got a lot going on in the news today. What was this? A map that reveals the U.S. targets likely to be on Putin's hit list in a nuclear war. So, found this interesting. It shows Washington State. It shows Sacramento, California, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Amarillo, Texas, the Pentagon, of course, Camp David, Fort Ritchie. One of the things about this is we got 7. They're showing 7 targets. But the Russians have 6,000 nuclear weapons. So I imagine there would be more secondary targets than just 7. And I also know out in this area in here, up here in the Midwest, not Midwest, but northern part of the Midwest, they have those silos. And they didn't even put them as a target on here. Of course, there'd probably be the number 1 target is the silos where they hold the Minuteman rocket system, you know. It says, global nuclear tensions and the threat of World War III seem to ratchet up by the day. While we're yet to fully enter a Cold War, I think we're fully in the Cold War right now, for crying out loud. Anyway, now, you know, they have this science where they talk about if we have a nuclear catastrophe, we're going to have what they call a nuclear winter. You know, that's unproven science. But we do have some proof of that it is. I mean, to the extent that why I say it's unproven science, to the extent that they say that it would drop the world's temperatures by and turn the world basically into a giant, enormous freezer box. I don't fully believe that. You know, one huge volcano. Well, not really a huge volcano, mid-sized volcano, but it really blows its top big. And this did happen, Mount Pinatubo. You know, I tend to think that if we have a nuclear catastrophe, that it perhaps won't be as bad. The nuclear winter part of it won't be as bad as they're projecting. And it would be something in the range, I think, of... now, this is just my own personal opinion on it. Don't take this to the bank. I'm not a scientist in this regard, but I do know that Mount Pinatubo blew its top back in the day, back in June 15th, 1991, and there's a picture of the eruption. And it blew as much stuff up into the air as thousands of these nuclear bombs. Quite seriously, because it was blowing that dust up into the stratosphere and the ionosphere, and well, I don't think the ionosphere, stratosphere, but anyway, it was blowing extremely high, and it did affect the world's temperatures back then. Here's a picture of it from space, blowing its top and blowing all that stuff up into space. Well, this is a long article. There's some of the dust that come off of it, Mount Pinatubo, and it did cause the world to cool down. And they measured this. Now, this was a long time ago, but they measured it. Let me see here. If I go down this article, look at the dust on the cars. That's something. Where is it here? It said how much it lowered the Earth's temperature, global temperature. So it says scientists measured a drop in the average global temperature of about 1 degree or 0.6 degrees Celsius over the 15 months following the eruption. Okay? So I'm thinking it would be more in the scale of what Mount Pinatubo did if we had some sort of a nuclear war. And so the way I look at it is the biggest thing that in the aftermath of a nuclear war, because there's going to be a day after, and a day after that, and a day after that. So yeah, they have their nuclear war, they have their big nuclear war or whatever. Goodness knows, maybe they knock half of the missiles out of the air before they ever hit the ground. Maybe they knock 3/4 of them out of the air. Who knows? They got some pretty advanced systems nowadays. So maybe we only get a quarter of what they expect to actually blow up. And maybe it's equal to Mount Pinatubo. Maybe the Earth drops by a degree. Or maybe even 2 degrees, So we do get that, what they refer to as, in parentheses, nuclear winter. But all of these things, it's survivable. And I know a lot of people out there say, oh, it's done, the world's over if they get a nuclear attack and everything. Well, you have to realize the countries that would be most affected would be China, the United States, Russia. These are the countries, the United Kingdom. These are the countries that would be the most affected by it. Possibly one of the biggest dangers in the aftermath would be keeping the nuclear reactors out there from melting down, because they need to be serviced. I don't know what they would do about that, but they probably have some sort of a contingency plan for it. And one of the second biggest things that would affect the people out here the most would be the disruption that it would cause, especially in food supply issues, just-in-time delivery and everything. Basically, we could look to see, especially in the United States, especially in places like Russia and China, this sort of disruption would very negatively affect the food chain for a year or two afterwards. And so there would be widespread famine and starvation. And so when you're thinking about preparing for a nuclear disaster, probably your area that you're in is probably not going to be in a direct hit from a nuclear bomb. And in fact, a lot of areas, if you're more than 50 or 100 miles away from a target, you might not even see it. Or if you do see it, it's going to be way off in the distance. And as far as the radiation's concerned, it mostly rains down on the site where the thing blows up. But it can blow with the wind as far as 60 or 70 miles, but in a narrow channel in the direction that the wind's blowing at. So that blows it up into the higher atmosphere, and that radiation rains down as fallout. But that fallout dissipates very quickly. And so, an awful lot of people out there, the first thing they think is, oh, we're going to all be scorched to death with the bomb. Probably not. That's probably not going to happen. The second thing is, oh, we'll have radiation everywhere and we'll get sick from radiation and die. Probably not. Most people are probably far enough away from city centers and target areas where they're not going to be affected by those two things. But what are you going to be affected by? Well, the power's going to go out. Telecommunications is going to go out. Right? And when it's over, probably a few days after it's over, the sun's going to come out. The sky's going to look normal. The birds are going to be chirping in the trees. And this whole philosophy that people have, this philosophy of, well, if there's a nuclear war, I don't want to live anymore. But you're going to want to live. So you might as well face the facts now, ahead of time, and logically think about what you have to do for your own survival. So yesterday I had a show on. If you didn't get to tune in, watch that show about how you can go out and actually make a shelter for yourself from practically nothing. It costs practically nothing, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that toward the end of my show. But why I'm emphasizing this right now is we're moving towards some bad stuff right now. Let me see here. The Ukraine conflict could escalate into full-scale war in Europe, top Russian military officer warns, with chances of expansion growing significantly. It says a senior Russian military officer has warned that the conflict in Ukraine could escalate into a full-scale war in Europe, declaring the possibility of Moscow's forces becoming involved in a new conflict is increasingly significant. You need to take this seriously. People need to take this seriously. I know you guys on my channel are taking it seriously. That's why you're still continuing to listen to what I got to say here. It says Colonel General Vladimir, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, head of the Russian Army's Military Academy of General Staff, made the alarming comments in the article for Military Thought, a Russian Defense Ministry journal. It says the article will only add to fears throughout Europe that a major conflict could be on the horizon after a slew of EU leaders and defense ministers warned citizens to prepare for the prospect of war in the coming years. Large-scale war in Europe. That's the very start, toward the very start of World War III. And look at how it's heating up in many different places. Right now, we got this thing going on between the Philippines and China. And basically, they're coming to loggerheads. They are button horns. They've locked horns, the Philippines and China. But under normal circumstances, I wouldn't see this actually happening. The world that we had back before the year 2020, you probably wouldn't have seen this happen. But now things have changed significantly. China is got their eyes on Taiwan. And they're very, very defensive over the South China Sea. It says the Philippine Navy says it will not allow China to remove a Philippine military outpost in the fiercely disputed South China Sea shoal where 4 Filipino Navy personnel were injured in a confrontation between China and the Philippine ships. Now, this just occurred. And this is highly tense because the United States is standing behind the Philippines. So, it wouldn't be a war between Philippines and China. And China's coming to loggerheads over this right now. It said the Philippines will not allow China to remove a Philippine military outpost in a fiercely disputed South China Sea shoal, a Navy official said on Wednesday, after 4 Filipino Navy personnel were injured in a confrontation between the Chinese and Philippine ships. They were ramming one another. I seen the videos. The ships were ramming one another. And you had Philippines on one ship and Chinese, and when the ships rammed each other, those men were only feet away, looking right at each other. Do you know how quick that could erupt into something big, a big confrontation? And blow out of control. And then which side would America be on? The Philippine side. And China. And the whole thing could just start up right there. In real time. Now, in the Ukraine war, Moscow warns a full-scale war in Europe as Zelensky's motorcade is almost hit by a bomb. It says the president was in Odessa to meet the Greek prime minister on Wednesday when the missile hit close enough for the leaders to look out the window of their car, and boom, there, right next to them or whatever, right that close, bang. A senior Russian officer of war was warned. Well, see, that's the article we had on earlier. But a missile strike killed 5 people and almost hit the Ukrainian president Vladimir Zelensky's motorcade. It sounds something like before the start of World War I or World War II. We're in that period right now where it's just like before Pearl Harbor. Quite seriously, guys, very dangerous out there right now. We're going through a very dangerous period in history, and we knew this. When 2020 hit and the virus hit, everybody was saying we're now in what they call interesting times, critical times. Actually, the Bible talks about that. It says critical times hard to deal with. That's what it uses, those exact words. And so when I said critical times, that brought that reference back to my mind. But, I mean, critical times do pass. Back around 1914 to 1918 in the Spanish influenza. And it came with the disease as well. The Spanish flu, which killed millions of people. Not unlike COVID. And then they had World War I. They fought it out in the trenches and stuff. But every time these wars occur, it's always, and the war ends at a certain point, and then a new day dawns. And survival is always the most important thing. And so we see this coming. And it's time to prepare. It's time to think of ways to prepare. You don't know what lies ahead, so you have to make preparations and then hope for the best. With a little bit of luck, a little bit of preparations, perhaps you'll make it through to the other side. And I think that there's really grand prospects for the world on the other side of this thing. The technological innovations that are going to come because of AI. We're going to move into a world where things could be so much better on the other side of this thing. Because technology is going to start moving 100,000 times faster than it's been moving. So that means in 1 year of progress, technologically speaking, is going to be equal to 100,000 years of progress, technologically speaking, on before, because of AI. And when AI starts to program itself, and it starts to do its own programming, and it starts to do its own innovation in science and technology, it moves. It's like a human. It works kind of like a human brain, except 100,000 times faster. The big difference between we have consciousness. We have conscious thought. We're like AI in a way. Inside of us, we're capable of conscious thought. But our brains move so slow. AI, it can figure it out and come to the conclusion before you even type the rest of the sentence in. It can already have it figured out. The speed. And so, when AI starts to invent things, what about that? When AI starts to take over and do all of these things that our brains have been doing, but 100,000 times faster. 1 year of innovation. And these will be innovations, things that's going to make life actually smoother. I mean, it's hard to tell what AI will actually, which way it'll veer, but I have a positive attitude about it all. Not a negative attitude. I don't think that it's going to be the end of humanity. I don't think that a nuclear war would be the end of humanity, but it would be very harsh. It would be such an extreme situation or scenario that, yeah, it's true, we could lose a good chunk of the world's population in such an event. And, depending on, I mean, it's just hard to tell which way this whole thing's going to flop. But stay tuned toward the end of the show, and I'm going to talk about these, what I was talking about yesterday a little bit. I have a few other things I want to talk about that. Okay, so Zelensky's motor car was almost hit. Wow, it's getting big. Now, in the precious metals markets, we're starting to see silver take a surge. And it has made it up over $24 now. It's at $24.21 and it continues to rise. If we can put $25 to rest and continue up higher and stronger than that, then we're going to start to maybe gain some momentum, as we start to move forward. But right now it's kind of tentative with silver. In my mind, it's kind of tentative because I've seen it fall back from this so many times that I'm kind of like holding my breath and waiting and seeing what happens. Now, gold's at $21.55. It's up $7.70 today. Cryptocurrency, has been on a tear lately. It's sitting right now at $67,033. Ethereum's at 38.11. And XRP's at 62.2 cents. Now, the Dow Jones today, I had this clicked on here, this page. It's up 220 points on the day today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average at 38,883. I come on here and I see it's up 150 points, it's up 200 points, 250 points, day after day. But somehow it never gets past that 39,000. It must... I don't know. Crazy world we live in. Taking a look at crude oil today, it's down 47 cents. Oil's been doing the same thing. It goes up almost every day. It hits that... It never crosses the $80 for very far lately, you know? So it's at 78.64 today. Well, I'm glad, because I don't want to have to pay too much at the pump. You know, the prices at the pump are quite extraordinarily high here in Canada. It's been running at $1.60 a liter. So you times 4 to get that gallon, your gallon price. So let's see, $1.60 is $3.20, and times 2, $3.20 is $6.40 a gallon. They're collecting up here an enormous gasoline tax that they're supposed to fix all the roads with. But our roads are so bumpy. And I don't see them out fixing them. You know? I think they're spending the money on other things. You know? Any rate, where's the money going? I don't know. But they're happy about it. Let me just put it that way. And you know, if that wasn't enough, you know what they got up here? In Canada, they got something called a TAL when they measure the gas at the pumps. It's called a thermally adjusted liter. So they sell gas by the liter, not by the gallon. A liter is 1/4 of a gallon, you know. So it's a thermally adjusted liter. And what that basically means is that they set the liter at a specific temperature. I think it's like 80 degrees or something like that. I don't have the degrees right, I know, but it is a specific temperature. But here in Canada, it's generally always colder than that, at the temperature that they adjust to that, because it's cold here most of the year. So because it's a thermally adjusted liter, there's a few drops less. I shouldn't say a few drops. It could be as much, quite a little bit, because of the temperature differential. And so a thermally adjusted liter would be great in some place like this, really warm, like if it was in Colombia or someplace like that. Then you'd be getting a little bit more, right? But in Canada, because things shrink when they're cold, and gasoline shrinks quite a lot, you know, they're getting a little bit of a, with their TAL, a thermally adjusted liter. And most people don't know, but I mean, it's one of these things where it's crumbs. They're taking the crumbs, but the crumbs add up when all the vehicles are getting fill-ups every day. Those crumbs add up into a lot. You know, they find every way that they can. All these manufacturers out there, everything, they always find every different thing that they can do. Whether you're buying yogurt at the grocery store, so you buy your cup of yogurt, right? And you finish it off, and you look down in the bottom of the container, and you see some sort of a bump there that they put in, like a depression in the bottom of you didn't even notice it when you bought it, the container, but that bump holds like a half a cup of yogurt. You know what I mean? Every way they can to cheat you, they're going to cheat you. This is the world we live in. A world where money is more important than human life. To them. To me, no, but to them, yes. Looking at bonds and rates today, well, you know, the long end's climbing. We're looking at the 10-year is up 1.2 basis points at 4.11, and the U.S. 30-year is up 2 basis points at 4.25. So I wanted to talk about that little house I was talking about yesterday. I call it a house. It's more of a shelter. You know, the person digs it into the side of of a hill, like with a shovel, and then they build it out of the trees that exist and rocks that exist around in the land, and they build a hearth into the hill. And what a hearth is like a little fireplace made out of stones that are stacked, and they got mud between them to hold them in place. And then when the hearth is fired up, the mud hardens and gets quite a hardness to it, because that's what mud does when mud gets really hot. Ripping fire in the thing, and it makes the mud harden up around it. So this is the technology that was used in the Middle Ages to heat homes and stuff, as a hearth. A lot of people don't even know what a hearth is today. I'm going to talk about it for a minute, How do you stay warm? How do you keep your fire from going out? Well, I'll give you some simple tips and methods, Get yourself about a dozen Bic cigarette lighters. Drop them into a little, what do you call it, bag? One of those little freezer bags that have the Ziplocs on them. Buy a good quality freezer bag, not cheap freezer bag. It might not even be a bad idea to drop that little freezer bag inside another freezer bag, so you got double bagged, so water cannot get into your Bic lighters. You get about a dozen Bic lighters, it's going to last you. If you're only using it to light a fire occasionally, and why I say occasionally, you'll find out in a minute, but say you're lighting your hearth up, those lighters will last you for years before they'll run out of fluid. And it's better than going through all this kind of stuff and trying to buy special flints and all this kind of stuff, The Bic lighter's so much more simple, cheaper, easier way, and you know what you got, But as time goes by, the lighters will run out of fluid, but it might take years if you're careful with them. So you got your lighters, light up your fire in your hearth, and you don't let that thing go out. You say, well, Glenn, fires go out. What you do is you leave the ashes in your hearth, unless they get extremely deep, but you leave the ashes in your hearth from the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. And so what you do is, toward the end of your day, you're getting ready to go to bed and go to sleep, and say it's frosting outside, the temperature, is about maybe 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it's cold outside. You'd perish out there, but you're inside your shelter. You're fairly warm, but the place is not insulated, and there might be cracks and holes in the walls where you didn't chink them real well. And there's another thing I want to talk to you guys about is this kind of a shelter. You got to chink it. What you do is you find moss and mud and stuff, and you chink it into the cracks and holes. But it's still going to be a little bit drafty, no matter what you do, because your door's not going to fit the tightest in the world. It's not like a regular house. It's not drafty. It's a little bit drafty, and so you got to keep your fire going late on a night like that. Maybe it's 30 degrees outside. Might be a little bit windy too. You wouldn't survive out in that if you were outside, but you're inside this little shelter, so it's warmer in there. But you're gonna time and late in the night, maybe, and you generally end up going to bed early now, because you go to bed more with the birds, because you don't have electricity anymore to keep you awake, with all those shows you used to watch. So you're laying in there, and your fire's getting down, and you're getting sleepy, and you're getting time to go to bed. Well, what you've done is, out in your yard where you cook your food, maybe 50 or 100 feet away at your site, where you get your big fires, you went out and you found yourself some stones around. You threw them in the fire. Why did you do that? Into the big fire that's a ways away, right? Because, some stones will explode in the fire and some won't. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the stones that weigh about 5 to 8 pounds, that went through the big fire, your bonfire, and they didn't blow up. Those are stable stones. And that's what you call them, stable stones. They're stable stones. You take a couple of those stable stones and keep them dry. Take them inside your shelter with you. Now, you've already tested those stones to make sure they're not gonna rupture and blow up. The stones will blow up. You got to be careful of them, I'm telling you. I used to do this stuff when I was a kid, so, I'm telling you guys from a bit of experience. Take those stones. It didn't blow up. Take a couple of them in with you. 5 to 8 pounders. About 5 to 8 pounders. 8 pounders are probably a little bit better. And you put them in your hearth. So your fire's getting down. You're getting kind of sleepy. You put that last big log on there. And you let it get lit from the underside. And so it starts to get a good bed of coals underneath it from the underside. Burn them from the underside. Now that'll burn for a long time all on its own. But then just before you go to bed, you roll those 2 stones out, or 1 or 2 stones out of the fireplace into the middle of your floor. You probably got either a dirt floor or maybe you've made a hand-hewn wood floor, but you roll them out onto your floor. And then what you do is you take and you pile ashes up over top of that big log in there. You cover it completely up with ashes all around it. All those ashes that you leave in the bottom of the hearth. Then you take those 2 stones, make sure they're not too hot. You don't want them lighting your bed sheets on fire or your bedding on fire, but you put them somewhere in the vicinity of your feet down there, making sure that they're not going to burn anything and not going to burn your feet. And they'll radiate heat way until the next morning. They're just like a heating pad to keep your feet warm, those 2 stones. Then you go to bed. You wake up the next morning. First thing you wake up, the first thing you do is go over there and you get that fire going again. When you scrub those ashes off of that log that you covered with ashes, you let it have air again, you'll find there's some burning coals still left on it, provided you didn't sleep more than, say, 9 hours. You can get your fire going again from that. And so each time you get your fire going, you didn't use any of your Bic lighters. You keep that fire going. That's a game you can play for, I mean, you got to have a bit of amusement in life after the nuclear war is over. You haven't got computer anymore or whatever, and things like that become your amusement. How long can you keep your fire going? How many days? Kind of a contest, Anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit. We got one more thing to look at in the markets here. 103.02 is the U.S. dollar index today, and she's dropping today. And I think we're going to see more and more of these days where the dollar drops and drops and drops. China and Russia and the BRICS nations, they're planning over there. They're planning some sort of new currency or whatever, and we haven't seen what it's going to be yet. But I can almost... one of the things that I know is it's coming. It's coming. You watch. And it's going to have a negative effect. Everything they do is having a negative effect, ultimately. But it's all really got to do with the foundation the dollar's built on. The dollar is a Ponzi scheme. It's a system of a Ponzi scheme. And it was built right in for failure when it first started. Because all Ponzi schemes end in failure. Problem with this failure is I think it's what's feeding all of this war tension. Is that failure that's imminent. And so these are the final days of the empire. America is sliding away in the dual world power, Great Britain and America together, which Britain was so powerful they said that the sun never set on the British Empire. This is why most of the world speaks English. The vast majority of I think it's like over 1.5 billion people speak English. Anyway, listen guys, thank you for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.